And when I make you fruitful and productive in your negative situation, then that will bring reward and promotion and cause you to forget the pain of your father's house. Joseph is thinking, God will deliver me first. Then he'll make me fruitful. Then I'll show up on time for work. Then I'll do my best. Then I'll be a little more excellent. And even today, people think God will cause me to forget my past, my pain, and he will deliver me from my father's house. Then God will make me fruitful. But those people are always looking for deliverance before being fruitful and productive. So they sit down and they complain and they whine and they go into a fetal position, or they stay in a counselor's office forever waiting on God to deliver them. But God's pattern is not to deliver you first from your negative past. First, right in the stinky situation, he makes you fruitful, makes you productive, he makes you excellent. And when you become fruitful and productive, your fruitfulness will make you forget the pain of your past. So God says, Ephraim first, then Manasseh. I will bless you with fruitfulness, then I will deliver you from the pain of your past. Now remember, I told you we all inherited problems in life that we didn't cause. And there are people waiting for those problems to get solved. And they're going to wait and wait and wait before they get on with their life. They want to experience Manasseh, deliverance, before they get on with their life and become fruitful and productive, Ephraim. Yet God is saying, if you want Manasseh before Ephraim, you will never be fruitful in life. But in the midst of your affliction, I'll make you fruitful first, and when I bless you, automatically, your promotion, your reward, your past will now have no influence over you again. If you don't experience fruitfulness and productivity, your past will haunt you for the rest of your life. Well, now I got to spend the rest of this time proving that with illustrations. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 23, this is David and the giant Goliath. As David was talking to his brothers, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from the battle lines and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard Big Mouth. For a poor boy, a nobody, David, to become rich, for a nobody to become a somebody and marry into royalty and get a princess, to be a debtor and become tax-free, first, you kill the giant. First, you got to be fruitful and productive. Until you kill the giant, you can't experience deliverance from your poverty or the ordinariness of your past. First, you have Ephraim, then Manasseh. So how's David going to kill Goliath? He's got to be productive. He's got to be fruitful. So how's he going to produce? He's got to use the tools he's been given, just like you. He only has what he has, but he's got to use what he has. And what he has is a slingshot and a stone. Goliath's got a spear, a big mouth. He's got armor. He's got a shield. David's only got a slingshot. But for years, David hasn't had a private parking place or a corner office. David hasn't had a good high-paying job. He's been in obscurity and rejection. Nobody calls on him. Everybody gives him the crappy job. And a lot of times when we face our giant, we're so overwhelmed by its size, we forget what we have. David has been out in obscurity throwing rocks for years. This is not just a quick something just happened. This guy has been training for reigning but doesn't know it. He's just been keeping predators off daddy's sheep. He's getting really good. And all the while, it's preparation for a future that's about to be offered. And we forget what we have. Don't worry about what somebody else has. What have you got? So nothing happens in the battle until a young man comes on the scene who's got confidence in his weapons. He could throw rocks. And because David had developed his skill with precision with lions and bears over years in a desert, he was confident, not cocky, he could take this giant down as well. He had a superior strategy. He wasn't stupid. He isn't going to get close to Goliath. He wouldn't have a prayer. He's going to launch a surface-to-air missile. So he gets within range. He knows his range well, boom, and lets that rock fly. That is not a lucky shot. That is a skilled shot by a guy who is excellent. He had been working on this skill for years, doing mundane things in obscurity, in rejection. I think sometimes people think God jumped on a magic stone, circled it around Goliath's head. Heck no. David knew he could hit this sucker. He had been developing his skill, and the only unprotected spot on the giant was his forehead. So this had to be a skilled shot. It wasn't just because God was with David. God's with every believer. But it was because David had also developed his skill with accuracy and precision, and God could use it to effect the victory. 1 Samuel 17, verse 50. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David prevailed because he knew how to use the skill that he had been developing for years, unwatched, unseen, unnoticed, unrewarded. What are you doing in your wilderness right now? Unseen and unnoticed. Yeah, well, when I get out of this crummy job, when I get that job, when I get this, when I get that, then I'll. That's called destination disease. And you'll never have anything. You're always waiting for somebody to give you something or for deliverance first before you're productive. And I'm just going to show you illustration after illustration where that just isn't going to work. So, he got the reward of a wife, riches, and tax-free living. If you want to forget your negative past, you start by being productive and fruitful, using your skill and ability right where you are to get the victory. And when you get the victory, the reward of your victory makes you forget where you came from or what you've been through. There are people still sitting in a negative situation in this room this morning, expecting God to deliver them. Lord, deliver me. Then I'll do some great things for you. God says, no. Get off your whining and self-pity potty and get out here and do something for me, and then I'll deliver you. And even Joseph did not correctly perceive how he was able to forget his father's house. He follows this same rule, but he didn't know it. Joseph was fruitful and productive. He served, he organized, he administrated in Potiphar's house and in jail. I mean, the kid it was his gift. So even though he was kidnapped, taken down, put in slavery as a Hebrew in an Egyptian house, what did he do? He did what he always does. I'm good at administrating. Pretty soon, Potiphar said, this kid is so good, I'm going to put him over everything, including my checkbook. He's got power over everything but my wife. Everything else, Joseph runs it. He got promoted out of a bad situation because he was fruitful and productive with what he had, though he was in a crummy situation. And then when he got put in jail, instead of saying, I didn't do anything wrong, I did everything right, I served this guy with excellence, and then this happens to me, I'm mad at God, I'm mad at my parents, I'm mad at the government, I'm mad at my family, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to sit, sulk, and sour. He didn't. He became an administrator and a trustee in a jail. He ran everything. That's what he did. That's the gift he had. That's what he used. Does everybody see that? This is going to get this kid promoted all the way up to Pharaoh. He hasn't got a clue that that's what's going to happen, but that's what did happen. He could also dream and interpret dreams, but that's all he knew. So even in affliction, he's being fruitful and productive by using the skill and gifts that he has. And the skillful use of those gifts brought him before Pharaoh. His fruitfulness and productivity in captivity got him delivered from prison and promoted to prime minister. See, if you can't be faithful in the ordinary, you won't qualify for the extraordinary. Jesus said, if you're not faithful with a little, you won't be faithful with much. So bloom right now where you're planted. If you wait and wait and wait, you're going to wait the rest of your life. First Ephraim, fruitful, productive. Then Manasseh, delivered. And when Joseph's brothers came to Egypt, Joseph had been so blessed, he had no vengeance in his heart towards them. And that's how God's going to do it for you. If you just wait for deliverance to come first, you can wait the rest of your life and have no deliverance. People pray, Lord, anoint me. I'll do great things for you. God says, no, start doing some great things for me and I'll anoint you. God's not going to solve your problem for you until you start using what he's given you. And while you're being busy, being productive with your skill and gift, he starts to deliver you from that painful past. Here's another little secret. God does not respond to self-pity or sympathy. He responds to obedience instantly. No matter how pitiful your case is, you won't attract God's attention until you move in line with his principles. Doesn't he say to obey is better than sacrifice, than anything? Just do what I told you. Remember the 10 lepers. Jesus said, go show yourself to the priest. And when he said that, they were not healed. But Scripture says, and while they were going, they were healed. It was in the process of going they got their healing. It was in Ephraim they got Manasseh. They simply obeyed what he said. What can we do? Well, he said, go show yourself to the priest. Let's go. Now, this is Ephraim. And when they got to the priest, Manasseh, they got healed. They just did what he said. He didn't ask them to do what they couldn't do. He asked them to do what they could do. So you got to obey God's principles. If you want a grain of corn to grow, no matter how you pray over that seed, spit on it, lay hands on it, cast demons out of it, it isn't going to grow. There's a principle here. If you want seed to grow, you plant it. You can pray over all you want to, but it's not going to grow. You got to plant it. That's a Bible principle. That's an agricultural principle. Plant it and it'll grow. If you want to receive a healing ministry before you pray for anybody sick, you'll never have it. If you want to prosper before you learn to trust God with your money and be generous and tithe, you'll never have it. God says, I'll give you Ephraim before you get Manasseh. You have to be fruitful in your land of affliction before God delivers you from the effect of your past. Another illustration, 2 Kings chapter 7. Now we've got Samaria under siege, starving to death. The people are locked in. They're boiling babies to eat. It's so desperate. They're selling dove dung for a quarter. People are so desperate. It's a bad situation. They're being surrounded and besieged by the enemy, by the Syrian army. And you got 4 lepers outside the gate. Well, they can't get in. And if they got in, they're going to die. There's no food. And if they stay where they are, they're going to die. And if they go out into the desert where the Syrian army is, they'll probably be killed. They don't know. So one of them makes this statement. Why sit here till we die? Boy, that'd be a good thing for some people sitting in here right now. You've just gone through a divorce. You went through a setback financially. Maybe you lost a job. And you just, I can see you at home and I can see you, over and over and over. And, your wife needs to say to you, or maybe a best friend needs to say to you, wives, are you just going to sit here and die? You can. God will allow you. Go ahead, sit there and die. He will let you. But if you'd like to change this thing, then you're going to have to be fruitful and productive right where you are now. A prophecy had been given the night before that said to these people starving, tomorrow at this time there will be abundance. Tomorrow, in one day, there's going to be no famine, going to be abundance. Everybody laughed. Everybody heard it, but nobody did anything about it. Like most believers, they probably felt, well, the Lord will bring it to pass in His own time. Well, that's cute, but that's not Bible. So rather than just sit and wait for deliverance, which would never come, they got up and walked towards the enemy's camp. And as they moved, the enemy heard the sounds of 4 armies. This was a miracle. God made them hear 4 armies coming, and they fled and left everything. And these 4 lepers walked into this enemy's camp and saw abundance. And the prophecy came true. If the 4 lepers had not moved, that prophecy would still be hanging in the air. There are prophecies hanging over many heads because they're waiting for it to happen by itself. But God says, you must be fruitful first. And the 4 lepers had to be fruitful by walking. Now, that's all they could do. They couldn't fight. They had no weapons. They're lepers, but they could walk. And they walked towards the enemy's camp. And as they began to do what they knew how to do, God gave them deliverance that He promised. And God will deliver us from our past when we start to be productive and fruitful. Everybody's got a solution sitting inside of you. You are a solution looking for a problem to solve. Every gift God gives you is the answer to someone's problem. Every thought that God puts into your heart is a response to a need. But not all of them get used, unfortunately. Those who have the courage to use what God has given to them ultimately receive the deliverance from their past.